everyone, welcome. My name is Alex. I'm an educator here at the Powerhouse Museum. The Powerhouse Museum acknowledges Australia's First Nations people as the traditional owners and custodians of the land and gives respects to elders past and present, and through them to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Today's workshop is a very exciting collaboration between the Powerhouse Museum and Red Room Poetry. And today we will be hearing from a few special guests. But before I introduce them, I would like to introduce a very special person, Campbell Bickerstaff. He is one of our curators here at the Powerhouse Museum.
Hi.
So, hi, Campbell.
Hey, Alex.
Excellent. And also joining us via video conference is David Stavanger from Red Room Poetry. And also joining us via video conference is Sara Saleh, Red Room Poetry's poet in residence for today's workshop. Excellent. So today we will be exploring poetry that can be inspired by special objects and the secret stories objects can have. Sara will be reading some of her own poetry inspired by a very special object to herself before leading us through some poetry exercises. And after Sara, we will hear from Campbell, and together we'll focus on a couple of unusual objects from the museum's collection and discuss how museums interpret objects. And finally, we shall finish up today by writing our own poetry inspired by special objects that you have sent in to us. But before all that begins, I'm going to hand over to David, who will explain a little bit more about who Red Room Poetry are and how you could use the skills you gained from today's workshop to enter the Red Room Poetry Object Competition for 2020. So I'll hand over to you, David.
Hi everyone, it's David Stavanger here. I'm down on beautiful Dharawal country at the moment for this special Zoom workshop co-presented with Powerhouse Museum. Poetry Object is a Red Room program. It's been running for about 15 years and it's Australasia's largest free writing competition for both students and teachers. And this year it's co-presented with Copyright Australia, which is fantastic. Copyright Agency, which is Australian-based. You can write in this competition in response to any type of object you like, an everyday object like a mobile phone, something you special had for a long time. You're going to see a number of those today. It's really exciting. I look forward to the work you produce in the workshop, and I'll talk more about the competition and how to enter that work or other poems you might write about objects at the end of this. But right now, I'm going to throw to Sara, who's a brilliant poet, to lead you through some poetry techniques.
Thank you, David. Can everyone hear me? Yes, loud and clear. Fantastic. I just wanted to, before I begin, take the chance to personally echo what was said and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I think it's important for me as an artist and a storyteller and a migrant to acknowledge the land that I'm on, Gadigal land, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I am very grateful to them for their generosity and their welcome in this space to share our stories and our poems today with each other. I also, before I kick off my poem, wanted to disclaimer it and say that I'm really excited to share it with you guys. Thank you for your patience. I know we've been having some technical difficulties, but I'm really excited to be here, really excited to share this poem that I wrote specifically for this workshop. I think you'll be writing a few object poems of your own, so hopefully this will inspire something. I won't tell you what the object is. I'm going to perform the poem and leave you to figure that out, or maybe I'll tell you at the end, show you. But yeah, the poem is called Beacon. When I was 8, I'd come home from school, the smell of fried garlic and onion spilling across the air. In tears, I would sit down and scribble on pale pink post-its. No more Arabic. Arabic is hard. I hate Arabic. I'd stick them up around the house. Early Eid decorations on windows, walls, on the fridge door. Then Mama would gently come and cup my face and coo her consonants and say, I know you're struggling, Sarah. We will do it together. I did not want a together that made me a foreigner, fractured me in halves like the languages scraping the back of my parents' throats. But it took me years to realize this is an act of bravery. Mama and Baba are brave, and Mama and Baba saw more of them. Now I carry this name necklace they gifted me, an unabashed Arabic announcement, Sara. Sad, Alif, Ra, Ha. A beacon of bright light, its worth is not in its shine, so whenever I go to see the world too, I never forget the way home. Sometimes I still smile in surprise, sweeping my collarbones, singing the songs my parents sing, and how I have never felt alone. Thank you. As I was saying to the group before, I normally when I perform, there are people in the room, and we kind of to get each other hyped up and excited, and to appreciate the poet, we're clicking and and stomping our feet. And so when I was reading this poem, I was definitely imagining you all there clicking away, very excited to hear this poem. So yeah, as you would have picked up, it's a poem that is about about this object, which is this name necklace right here, which has my name in Arabic, but of course it's linked to and inspired by much bigger things, being my family, my parents, my culture, my identity, questioning where I'm coming from or where I've come from and who I am today, and how that sort of shapes who you are. And it can sometimes be a struggle, I think, figuring that out as you grow up in between sort of different worlds, as they say. So that's the poem. I hope you liked it. I think it is time to have a little bit of fun. So what I wanted to do was kick us off with a bit of a warm up. And so I don't know if you can see the slides, but I will assume that they are in front of you. If not, that's fine. But basically, this warm up is called Taboo. So I'm going to go with the topic of summer, just because I think it's more fun, even though I had school, but then I realized, silly me, why would I put school and expect anybody to choose that? So yeah, summer. And I was hoping that basically you could give me a few words if you guys want to unmute yourselves and just kind of at the same time write them down in the chat box so you can see them. So a few words that remind you of summer, essentially. Yeah, pool, exactly right. Popular one. What else? Yeah, very hot. Unfortunately, getting hotter and hotter. Yeah, what else? What else does summer remind you of? I prefer the term glow, but yes, sure. So what else? Exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at. So you can describe summer in terms of what it is, what it feels like. So you said hot, you said sweaty, sun, heat, all those kinds of related derivatives. But then also you can talk about what you do in summer and what are kind of some of the more consistent activities. So things like pool and beach and swimming, but then also friends. So friends, what else? I mean, who do you see? Who do you hang out with? What do you do? You have fun, right? Summer's the time for travel and adventure. What else? Don't be shy.
I say Christmas.
Yes. Perfect. So we have a sunny Christmas over here, and we have a whole lot of barbecues around that. So we have birthdays, celebrations, religious holidays. So Christmas being one of them. There's a lot more in that kind of period. So you could say religious holidays, New Year's Eve. Would that be something that happens in Australia over summer? Okay, so I can't see the chat box, but I am hoping that someone has typed these words down because you're going to need to remember them for this exercise. But basically, what I would like you to do is spend the next couple of minutes writing maybe 2 to 3 lines about summer. But the catch is that you are not allowed to use any of the words that we just kind of mentioned. So hopefully you've got that list in front of you. If not, they're not that hard to remember. So I need 2 to 3 lines. If you can just spend a few minutes to, writing about your summer, describing it or describing a particular event or activity in summer, but you are banned from using all those words. They are taboo. All right. Who's up for sharing?
I kept writing stuff down and then scribbling it out, so I don't really have anything.
Oh, no. Would you like to share even just one little line with us? What were you trying to think of?
I was trying to think of the moment you kind of leave the hot car when you like go to the beach and like you kind of your skin kind of rips off the sticky seat and you kind of like trying to hurry down as fast as you can to get to the water so you can finally cool off and like dip your feet in there.
That's fantastic, because that's like I'm instantly there in that image. Like I'm feeling the heat and I'm feeling just that desperation to get into the water. Like, yeah, that's fantastic.
I love that you picked something that's very vivid in terms of the imagery, as Alex said, but also the keyword there is that feeling. And I think emotion is something that people don't realize is unique to you and how you are feeling. Nobody can kind of replicate that or copy that. It's specific to you, and that's why I am particularly a fan of poems or lines that convey an emotion or feeling, because again, it's special to you only. And so I love that feeling of relief when you've come out of the car and you've you see the water, and it's very relatable to everybody, I think. So I love that you combine that. But I hope you didn't use any of the banned words, because the point was not to use. and like writing about feeling and emotion is actually a way around that, a way around not using any of those words or repeating ones that we said on the list. So thank you for sharing. I particularly like this exercise because it is like, it's fun and it's light, but also actually it's a lot harder than people think it is. And we only did one topic, but obviously there are whole ways. And it's something that I use as a poet when I'm warming up even myself before a writing session. And I think for me, it not only, as I said, gets you to think outside the box, but it kind of challenges your perception and your ways of thinking about a particular thing. So, these are topics or themes or issues that we talk about all the time in poems. How many poems are about love or family or whatever it is? Like, it's always the same things. There's only a finite amount of things that we can talk about, and so it's always the same things being talked about, but they're written or talked about in a different way. So I guess the trick is, how do you write about the same things in and say the same old things, but in new and different and exciting ways? And so doing this kind of challenges your perception, your way of thinking, and also the language that you use. So you don't always resort to the same few words that describe summer, such as heat or sun, the obvious words, the cliches. It forces you to think and to not rely on those cliches and not rely on the same ways of talking about those things. What do you guys think, based on that, then makes a good poem from a kind of a technical point of view? Yeah, originality, absolutely. Creativity. What else from a technical point of view? So what have you learned in English when you guys do poems and you analyze them? What are you normally looking for? Yeah, structure. So with stories usually have a start. Is that right?
Yep.
Start, middle, and end. So poems have the same. Yes. Poems have a start and a middle and an end, albeit in a different way. What else? So you said originality, format. What about themes? So in my poem, the one that I performed earlier that I read to you guys, what do you think the theme was? Yeah, home. Love that. What else? Identity. Yes, exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
So, it's on the surface, the theme you could say is an object. That's kind of the main idea, that you're writing about an object. But the way that I have written it, and hopefully that's how you'll also approach your poems, is that you've woven and linked different themes. So whilst it might seem like it's about an object, actually it also links to much bigger issues, much bigger themes around family and home and identity, and questioning that and what that looks like for me. So and that this object can inspire so much, can inspire these themes. So yes, definitely themes are something that you want to look for in a poem, which the technical definition of a theme is like a life lesson or a statement about human nature, a particular thing that the poem expresses. And it's essentially, it's like a thesis statement, the main idea or ideas. You can have multiple in a poem. And the way that you would determine the theme is that you look for things such as structure, sounds, word choice, poetic devices, what they're all pointing to, how they come together to express
a particular theme or themes. So yes, themes make a poem. And finally, I said poetic devices. Essentially what I mean are, poetic literary techniques. So you guys have done literary techniques before, is that right? If you have, can you give me some examples? Yeah, exactly. So metaphor would be one. And obviously there are a whole range, and I'll touch on that in a second. But again, when you think about literary techniques and why they're important, it's sort of related to what we were saying about the warm-up, about taboo, because they are specific, deliberate constructions of language that you as a poet use to convey a specific meaning. So you could use a whole range of literary techniques to talk about summer, and using words deliberately and constructing them in a way that you talk about summer to convey that meaning, but without ever resorting to kind of the usual words, the usual cliches. So literary techniques are actually quite exciting. Poets love to play around with them. They can be, it can be a word, single word or phrase, or a group of words or phrases, but ultimately you are conveying a particular meaning, a particular point, but you're just doing it using a different, exciting, new, sort of interesting language. And poetic devices are the tools to help you do that. So it is an art, but it is also a science, I like to say, at least. And this stuff takes time, it takes practice. So you can write literary techniques, and you can write ones that are kind of okay and mediocre. You can write really great ones in terms of examples. So you mentioned metaphor. So the direct relationship where one thing kind of, or idea, substitutes for another. So an example of that might be actually I'll use this one, a curtain of night. So it's kind of like my go-to. I really love that. A curtain of night. So we're using a curtain to metaphorically talk about the nighttime. So it could be physically, like I'm trying to say that it comes down like a curtain, and it sun's out, and it's, as you say, takes over. It could mean something like a little bit different, like a curtain of night. Curtains cover things. So, I could be talking about the night coming down and covering things, masking things. You obviously see less at night. There's darkness everywhere. So that's kind of like things hide in the dark. So that's another way. And that's what I love about metaphors. Like you can understand it in different ways, and it still works perfectly. I won't explain each of these to you because I'm going to assume that you know them already. But if you don't, please let me know. I will. But some other examples of literary techniques are, for example, hyperbole. So you all know that means to exaggerate, greatly. So something like I hate doing the laundry because it takes forever is hyperbole. Something like, I said this before, Sarah and David are the best, most awesomest poets to ever walk the planet. Hyperbole. Could be true, we don't know, but okay. So that's an example. What else in terms of literary techniques? So we've talked about metaphor, hyperbole. I'll throw in simile because that's easy. What else do you guys have? Yes. What else? What other literary devices? Yeah, I love personification. So when you're giving inanimate objects or abstract concepts, sort of like a human self-awareness. So, human thoughts, actions, perceptions are directly attributed to that particular object or idea. So one example would be life smiled at me, which is another way of saying life is good, or, positive, I'm happy, life is smiling at me. In my poem, the second line, I say, the smell of fried garlic and onions spilling across the air. That could be a metaphor, obviously. It could also be a personification because spilling, like humans spill. So for me to say the smell of fried garlic and onions spilling across the air also. There's some more literary techniques as well. Alliteration, amazing. So lovely little lady, angry, awkward alligator, to quote some of the kids from earlier. So using the same or similar consonants in consecutive words, so within the same sentence or line. So in mine, I also said, I was just looking at it, in tears, I would sit and scribble. So sit and scribble on pale pink post-its. So I did a double alliteration in that sentence there. So pale pink post-its being an alliteration as well. So yeah, you've got alliteration, hyperbole, personification, onomatopoeia, metaphor, simile, repetition, and rhyme. So repetition, what's the point of repetition in a poem? And I know this is super basic. This is just to refresh you guys in as we get to the poem and writing the poem. So what's the point of repetition in a poem, do you think? Exactly right. Exactly. So poems, when you're repeating something in a phrase, like repeating a word or phrase or even a structure, it's usually to emphasize a particular idea in the poem that the poem's trying to get across. And also it makes it quite aesthetically, or rather like it sounds quite pleasing. It's catchy. So, turn on the radio and every other song, every chorus is repeated, refrains are coming through songs. So that's kind of the point. Like, they're poems, and they use this repetition to get you hooked, but also to convey a particular meaning. So that's the kind of the structure. And rhyming, songs also use rhyme, poems use rhyme. So rhyme is also, I think, a way to kind of keep things interesting and use language in a way that is also, as I said, pleasing to hear and to read. So there's so many different ways that you can make your poem, using these tools. You can craft a poem that is exciting and interesting and plays with language when you put these tools to practice. One more thing before I hand you over to Campbell was that I wanted you to think about. So literary devices, but also your senses. So how does it look like, or what does it look like? How does it smell? What does it sound like? The touch, obviously. So how does it feel? And the taste. So using and thinking about your five senses as well to really build a structure around your object and a story, plus the literary techniques together, I think, is a really great way, like the kind of the building blocks of any poem that you're going to write, but specific to the object poem as well.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was fantastic, and excellent. So we'll now be hearing from our fantastic curator Campbell about how curators research and interpret objects for the collection here at the Powerhouse Museum. So yeah, thanks, Campbell.
Thanks, Alex. Well, she does build it up a lot, Yeah, I don't know. Fantastic. I don't know how people become curators. It's all sort of an accident. Hi, welcome. Thank you, Sarah. That was really amazing. I got to hear that poem, and again, thinking deeply about the way I write and interpret material culture, which is what I'm here for. Museums collect material culture. Material culture is the things that we make, the things that we use. And we believe that by retaining this material and interpreting it, we begin to understand, to some extent, what it is to be human. What is it that we're up to? And there's lots of different strategies. When I first began writing about objects, it was really about objects that I was familiar with, and I knew who the maker was, and I was able to speak to them, or I was able to speak to the family, because they were all still around when we gathered up that material. And we don't always have that opportunity. We don't always have the opportunity to speak to the people who have made the material. For instance, at the moment, I'm looking at an vase that was made in 2000 BC, and what is it you can write about it? And I love the ideas of creative writing and the strategies you can use, because you want an audience to become engaged with the object. And so I am drawn in particular to objects where I can see the hand of the maker, and they don't even have to be individually. They can be mass-produced objects, and if you know the designer and you know their strategies, I can identify with them. Since working with Red Room, we've been doing poetry object for 3 years now, and it's been a matter of pulling something out of the collection which I think has a very powerful story to tell. And I'll just bring up a picture of an object that's been in the collection for some time. I just want to talk about, this is a photograph. So we've got a set of 12 photographic prints which we got from, I think it was Columbia, and they were a record making company here in Australia in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. But this came to us in the 20s because she's finishing off the edge of a 78 RPM record, and they were made of shellac. It's a girl working in a factory, and when I was flipping through all the photographs, I just got stuck on this one, and there was something in the image that I found quite powerful, and I didn't know really what it was. You sometimes a photograph, you just keep looking. It captures you, and you just keep looking at it and investigating it. And so it was always in the back of my mind. It's been I saw it 20 years ago, and we just recently published a book, and I was able to include it in that volume and write about the photograph and some of the things in it that I was able to draw. So even though we know the circumstances of where this photograph was taken and what it was used for in the museum, it was to teach people about how records were made. So we had all this material which showed the process. But here's this photo of some women in the factory as part of the process of making records. And it just seems to be, for me, I don't know if this is, I know it's a very subjective thing, but I'm drawn to that face, and I'm drawn to that gaze, and I'm drawn to the hand, I'm drawn to that hair that's beautifully coiffured, and that she's actually dressed quite elegantly for a factory. So it tells stories. And this is one of the jobs of a curator, is to try to extract these things that perhaps might be unknown or not immediately apparent. And so, I can use this object to talk about the changing role of women in the workplace. I can use it to talk about the materials and the technology. I can use it to talk about photography. And so it's a very versatile object. And for me, it's quite a poetic image. Using language and writing, no writing here, this was just off the cuff, but trying to use language to unpack mysterious objects is a thing a tool that we use as curators to help people identify with these unusual things within the collection. So we're about to show you a short video which I did, which was sort of about the Tire Swan, and it's about perhaps why it's in the collection, what it means, and what it means to me, and what it means to the museum in a creative fashion. So here we go. The Tire Swan. Its origin is unknown. This example was found in Mount Druitt in the late 80s. And luckily, because it was a disappearing breed, it now belongs here in the collection of the Powerhouse Museum, where we study it. It's made from a tire. It's designed to go into a garden as a sculpture. It started life as a simple tire And one of the reasons it became extinct was because of steel belted radials. This is an ordinary tyre produced before the 1950s. And so you were able to cut it. The pattern has never been found, but it's made from cuts in the tyre which create this neck and head and the wings and a tail. The tail is a reverse of the head. Once the cuts have been made, the tyre is turned inside out. It's nailed to a base. Wire is used to reinforce the neck, and it is then painted. And this one has highlights, of course, with the beautiful red beak and the red painted thumbtack eyes. It can be confusing for audiences when you display an object like this in a different circumstance. In a garden, in the suburbs, what did it mean? Was it because the maker realised the cost of disposing of a tyre was prohibitive and they wanted to recycle it, and they'd seen previous examples of it, and that's what they did? Or was it the artist, the suburban artist, making some new meaning from a very humble object? So that was a short video where I've got an object from the collection and I'm trying to use a strategy with presentation and language to make it entertaining, I suppose. And it's, as a curator, you don't just want to write labels and bombard people with facts. You're there, I think, as part of this role to excite the audience into engaging with the objects. So this is part of the process of me as a curator becoming more and more involved with Red Room and the creative writing techniques and thinking about new audiences for the museum and ways that they can interact and understand objects or write about it themselves. And so with the Tyre Swan, you have a multitude of angles from which to interpret the object, whether it be utilitarian or sculpture or art or recycling, and it's a strategy as curators that I think we should be encouraged more to do, to open up the interpretation of the collection to the audiences. It's been a long journey, but the practice of using language and interpreting and collecting material is constantly changing, and we're moving towards more open ways to let audiences interpret the material themselves and engage with it.
Thank you, Campbell. Well, it's now time to put your poetry skills into action. Prior to today's workshop, we actually asked you to send us an image of an object that is special to you. We got a whole heap of special objects sent in, not only from yourselves, but also we had another session earlier today with some primary school age learners. So we've actually chosen those objects today. I believe you can see them on the screen. So basically your task for today is to choose an object and imagine the object's story. Why is the object special? Who might have used it? What was it for? And then you're going to write a short poem about this object. So you can see them on screen there. If your object is on screen, I'm going to ask you to choose a different object. So don't choose the one that you might have submitted. We want you to imagine this object's story. So while you are writing, we will stay connected and the images will be displayed, so this screen will be displayed, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to come up with the start of your short poem. Remember, this is just a first draft of a poem, so don't worry about it being perfect. We want you to have fun with the object and to write what you imagine its secret story to be. Some of those poems. got a couple of lines down. Is there anyone who might like to read out what they've got so far?
Yes, please.
Remember, this is just the first draft, so your poem doesn't have to be perfect. Anyone feeling up to sharing?
I shared. Come on.
Even if you read a first line or a favorite image.
Yeah.
I shared too. I had to share.
You could also just share with us a story that you imagined for the objects.
Yeah.
So there were quite a number of objects. You can tell us maybe what story you imagined for it.
Or a simile you came up with.
Are your mics on?
Nobody wants to share.
Come on.
Oh no. Could you tell us which object you looked at, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. What objects?
What one did you gravitate towards?
I chose the teddy bear.
The teddy bear, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
really
Well
cute
done.
one, a
Good
really
choice.
sweet one. I think everyone pretty much has that sort of connection to those toys. Like we all have those sort of in our lives. Did you imagine a story about that? Like, did you think of who owned it?
Yeah, I did. I kind of, I have younger siblings, and what kind of went through my head was playing out in the garden with them, and they're kind of like a chasing game, and you're like running after them, and they're like squealing really high with laughter and stuff. And it kind of reminded me again of when we were talking about summertime and all that. So I guess that was kind of what I was thinking of.
We are almost out of time for today, but before we leave, I just want to hand it back over to David for a quick reminder about the Red Room Poetry Object Competition. To just tell us how you could maybe use these skills that you've gained today to enter the competition. So I might hand over to David.
Yeah, so Poetry Object this year, which is being represented with Copyright Agency, the deadline's been extended to July 10th, end of term 2. So you've got time to extend on these poems or on any other poem. It can be any object. It can be your mobile phone. It can be something special. It can be a piece of clothing. I particularly like this jumper, special to me. I'd probably write about that. Whatever you like, whatever you define as an object, any poem up to 20 lines. If you go to, I think if we can put the link up possibly in the chat, if you go to the Red Room, poetry.org, look at the projects and go down to Poetry Object. All the links of how to submit, you just submit online there. Up to 20 lines of poetry about any object you like. There's cash prizes, there's books.
Yeah, get to the prizes, David.
Yeah, okay, cash, books, but also amazing mentoring with other poets, which I think is so great to be able to give your words to a poet and get your voice out there in new ways. So check it all out, put work in. It's free to enter. You've got nothing to lose, everything to gain. Poetry Object.
Please enter those poems. They're epic.
Good. I hope we get a few young poets from today's workshop entering the competition. Well, I really hope you had fun writing about the special objects today and hearing from each other and our special guests. But unfortunately, that has brought us to the end of our time together today. I'd like to thank our excellent poet-in-residence, Sara Saleh. Thank you so much for taking us through those fun poetry exercises and sharing your poetry with us. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to Campbell for showing us the tire swan and also the photo from the collection. It's truly unique and special objects that we have here at the Powerhouse Museum. And also thank you to David for joining us and letting us know more about the Red Room Poetry Object Competition. So a huge thank you to you guys for joining us today. We had a lot of fun hearing your poetry and hearing your thoughts. It was really great, and I hope you got a lot out of it, and it was fantastic to also see all of your special objects. So I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and thanks again. So bye.
Bye.